you're just too good for your family. You're ashamed of us and who we are and what we stand for. So you decided to go around town passing rumors about your pitiful family. And you're like, huh? So now you're almost blinded by the gaslighting. It's like being in some sort of carnival house of mirrors. You don't know which way to turn. Today we're going to take on a bit more of a complicated issue, which is why do people sort of stick in these relationships with narcissists as long as they do? And when is it too long to the point where it starts doing real harm to you? Thank you, as always, to all of you for helping make this community of YouTube subscribers who are better equipped to deal with narcissism, and also to be able to share this information with their friends and loved ones and family members to help protect them as well. Please hit the bell, subscribe. We've got 2 new videos coming out a week. So let's talk about this idea of sticking it out with a narcissist. I have recently been having some interesting conversations with people, and it sort of gelled for me and hit me that people don't like the idea of leaving the party too soon. They would rather be in a situation where they stay at the party long enough that they're like, yeah, I done seen this party through, versus leaving too soon and finding out, wow, things got actually pretty interesting. Now, you don't want to stay at the party so long that it's humiliating or embarrassing. A better example might be a casino table. You know, listen, what's the fear at the casino table? That the next hand I'm about to hit 10 blackjacks, right? And if I leave now, that's going to happen. But then if you sit and you bust 10 times, and you've lost a lot more money, now you've sat at the table too long. So let's talk about this entire model with a narcissist. And it may be a narcissistic partner. It may be a narcissistic friend. It could be a narcissistic coworker or boss or job or any of these things. Why do we stay around for so long? What some people want, and I see this now, and listen, I know some of you are thinking, oh, this is going to be true of me too. They want enough data. They want enough support for leaving so they feel confident that, yep, I know this was definitely not going to change. They kept staying. They kept staying. And you know what? And really, you guys, I'd love for you to think about this. I'm guessing that a lot of you actually didn't think it was going to change, but you wanted to be 100% sure that this pattern you were dealing with was indeed a pattern, no matter what. I'm amazed at how many people stuck it out like, all right, yeah, he cheated 5 times with 5 different people. I think we're pretty clear on what we're dealing with. Or he flaked on my important exhibition 3 different times. Yeah, I think I know what I'm dealing with. Or he missed the kids' soccer game 6 Saturdays in a row. Yep, I think I know, or 6 years in a row, whatever it is. You need enough data. You need them to yell at you enough, to lie to you enough, to cheat on you enough, to deceive you enough, to screw you over enough that you're like, yep, clearly established, this is a pattern. Here's the rub. I get it. Listen, I'm the first one to say, because I'm somebody who actually kind of does tend to get like a little bit, I'm prone to regret. So I like to be very sure, before I make a decision, sometimes to a fault. So a lot of us stick around so that like the day we walk out, there is not a moment of doubt. In fact, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this. How many of you stayed at the party too long with a narcissist, stayed in the relationship too long because you wanted to be absolutely sure that this was truly toxic before you left? I'd be curious to think, how long did you stay? Like, how long do you think was too long? Did you stay 6 months too long? Did you stay 5 years too long? Would love to hear your comments on this one. But here's the thing. You stay that long, and then there's that day you're like, absolutely not. Like, this is not good for me. This is toxic. This is unhealthy. I'm out. But then the question becomes, in staying so long so you could have that conviction, how much harm did you do to yourself? Because while one could argue that the human psyche, the human spirit, the human soul is actually quite resilient, I've got to tell you that in the clients I've worked with who stayed in any kind of narcissistic relationship for a long time. These aren't just romantic relationships. These are with parents, siblings, co-workers, best friends, you name it. That the damage of this lasted for years. They still doubted their judgment. 5 years out, like, I don't know, maybe not, or maybe I'm wrong, or still second-guessed themselves. They still had self-doubt. It still impacted their self-esteem. They still weren't able to be kind to themselves. They still did all the second-guessing and the questioning of themselves that started in that relationship. So the longer you stay, the longer those echoes will last. Now, some of you might be thinking, damn, Dr. Ramani, this was my mother. I've been in this relationship my whole damn life. I get that. But the moment you realize what you're dealing with, I am not telling you to divorce your mother. I am telling you, though, to be realistic about what you're dealing with. So when your mom makes that mean-spirited comment about your weight, or your dad makes that really kind of underhanded, like, oh, I bet they're not paying you more for that promotion kind of comment, you have to have that internal chuckle, like, here they go again, I got this, and you almost smile knowingly to yourself, right? You may not be able to leave it, but the sooner you get that knowledge of what you're dealing with, you can set up the fences, you can set up the boundaries, so that at least you can maintain the expectations and at least create psychological distance, if not literal distance. That boundary line between the conviction of when you need to leave and the harm that comes from staying too long is one of the great paradoxes of a narcissistic relationship. I can't sit here and tell you how long is too long. Some people meet someone, and as we've clearly stated, narcissists are not black and white. It's subtle. And they may have certain qualities that are very compelling to you, even if they're just nostalgia and history. So we have our good moments. To get to that point of conviction takes a different amount of time for each of us. But you gotta ask yourself, how well do you really need to learn to take a punch? And I don't mean necessarily a literal punch, but how good do you have to get at taking on insults? The more we hear that stuff, the more it cuts away at our hearts, our minds, and our souls. The only way anyone in the world is ever going to respect you is if you're the first one to do it. And that can be very hard to do if you had narcissistic parent or parents and never got to learn that in the first place. It means that it gets harder to get to that point of conviction that it's time to go, and that you don't stay so long that you're at the point of harm. It's really robbing Peter to pay Paul. How long is too long to stay? And how much harm do you do to yourself if you stay too long? I wish I could give you an absolute answer on this one. It's not my place to tell you you've got to leave now. But I will tell you this. If you're dealing with a narcissist, no matter what, realistic expectations, radical acceptance, not personalizing, and trying to minimize the engagement, that is the best way to start so that you can figure out what your exit strategy looks like or how you're going to end up maintaining boundaries in this relationship in the long term.
Now, this video, I don't know how many of you have ever gone to a casino and played a slot machine. I'm guessing a lot of you. Those of you who don't know, a slot machine is something that you put money into and you press a button or pull a lever and then you see if you win a prize, okay? So that metaphor is what we're going to work with today. Because if you could understand this and some of the more interesting research or things we know about slot machines, you're going to learn a lot about how you get stuck in narcissistic relationships. So let's talk about how these slot machines manipulate us, just like narcissists do. Now, as many of you know, if you've read my books or watched other videos, I have used the slot machine analogy to describe why narcissistic relationships are so seductive. These relationships work on something, so as do slot machines work on something called a variable interval reinforcement schedule, which is a very fancy way of saying that these are things where you don't know when you're going to get a prize, when they're going to hit you with a reward. From time to time, when they do hit, it can feel good. Sometimes the reward is small, less often it's big, but you just don't know when the reward is going to happen. And on top of that, there's always this possibility of a big jackpot and endless riches. And all of this from just pressing a button. So what do? You keep pressing the button because sometimes you just don't know when you'll get rewarded. And that is just a summary of the narcissistic relationship, not just a slot machine. You get some good days here and there, and it's not because of anything you do, but when they happen, especially in the midst of the usual criticism and manipulation and ickiness of the narcissistic relationship, it feels wonderful and also serves as a reminder that maybe you're the one who's wrong and it is okay. It is an okay relationship, right? And it lightens the pressure of the cognitive dissonance, and it gets you even more committed to wait out whatever the jackpot is in a narcissistic relationship. I suppose in a narcissistic relationship, that might be them completely changing and becoming empathic and kind and seeing you and all the wonderful things that you are and no longer gaslighting you. I suppose that some people win slot machine jackpots that are worth millions of dollars. I've never met anyone who's done that. I suppose some people in narcissistic relationships have a day where their narcissistic person turns around and there's a 180-degree turn, and the narcissistic person they're in a relationship with becomes sweet and empathic and respectful and kind. I've never met those people either. Now, there was an article from the Atlantic magazine in December of 2016. I highly recommend you go check it out. It was absolutely fascinating. I was like, ooh, this is really takes on slot machines and narcissism. It was actually, this again, an older article on pathological gambling and the fact that the vast majority of casino gamblers play these machines, slot machines, poker machines, the machines they interact with. So these machines are a cash cow for casinos. Once upon a time, these machines were mechanical. They had 3 reels, and each reel had a certain number of pictures or symbols on it, and a certain number of blank spaces. And when you added up the various combinations that all these little reels and their pictures could make, that was about 10 to 11,000 combinations that were possible. And then inside this mechanical slot machine, there was a random generator in the machine that would stop the reels, meaning that your odds of winning something weren't great, at least something substantial weren't great, but they weren't impossible. Now, apparently in around the 1980s, the machines were now, they were shifting the technology, and they were operated by computer chips. And the reels and the combinations of the reels were now run more by these chips and these algorithms, and not a random mechanical generator. So they could program the odds to make it less likely of someone winning big. They were random-ish, but not like it was back in the day, and could be designed to pay out, again, big less often. So these slot machines basically went from being sort of low-grade narcissists to more malignant and manipulative narcissists. And do keep in mind that, at least in the United States, slot machines are inspected by gaming commissions and the like for each state. So while all of this is manipulative, it isn't illegal, just like narcissism. But here's where this article made it really interesting, and where we can learn a deeper lesson about narcissism. That is in how the slot machine makers did something really diabolical. Old school slot machines were mechanical and ran randomly. So they would just spin and land on whatever they landed on. But the newer computer slot machines are smarter than that. They play on something that behavioral psychologists know really well, that an almost win or a near miss has the same impact on our brain as a win, and it keeps us in the brain. So what does a near miss or a near win look like? Well, in a slot machine, for example, it would be when you get 2 sevens, and on the third reel, that last 7 is just under the line. You get super excited, like, oh, I almost won. And in the midst of that almost won excitement, you think you almost won, so does your brain. So you say, I'm going to keep trying. And this is why statistics classes should be required for every human being on the planet, by the way. The next pull isn't more likely to win because you almost won. It's random. If you flip a coin and you get tails twice, it doesn't make it more likely that the next time you're going to get heads. The odds of getting heads or tails is always the same. The prior coin flip doesn't matter. But that almost winning, that 7 that almost makes it, gets the brain's reward circuits running in a more excited way, and you play for longer. B.F. Skinner, the famous behaviorist, has said, almost hitting the jackpot increases the probability that the individual will play the machine. Boom, you're more likely to play because you almost won. And what's bad is that the programmers of these machines are using a technology called virtual real mapping, which is far more complicated than I want to get into here. And what these programmers have figured out is a way to program the almost win into the machine. So almost winning occurs more times than it would randomly. So the person is more hooked, but they aren't winning. And in fact, some countries, they think this is so manipulative, are considering reforms to getting rid of these machines. But it plays on that behavioral hook. The brain experiences the almost win as a win, so we play for longer. And this effect is more pronounced for people who are problem gamblers, the very people who are most vulnerable to the allure of the slot machine, the people who play too long and lose so much that it puts their lives in peril. Now, interestingly, and a student of mine in one of our class, when I was teaching about this, said, scratcher lottery tickets work the same way. You scratch off the symbols, and then you'll get winner, winner, and then loser. And they even put the winning symbols more on the left because we tend to scratch them left to right. And by getting so close, thinking you almost won, what do? You buy more scratcher lottery tickets. So back to narcissism, because this whole real thing is a great way to think about cognitive dissonance and how people get stuck in narcissistic relationships. Because narcissists give us lots of almost rewards or almost wins, that moment when you almost get all 7s. Some of this falls under the future faking mantle. They pretend to want the same things as you and promise them and then never deliver them. You listen to their chit chat about their promises and it feels so real. So it feels like you're almost there, almost getting that thing they promise, but then it never happens. The jackpot never comes, but for a minute you thought it was. And those damn slot machines have yet one more thing, bad thing, programmed into them. These newer slot machines, and I'm sure you've seen them if you've gone to a casino, are more complicated, with 5 video reels all playing out on a screen, and it's hard to figure out what pays out and what doesn't. You put $5 into the machine, you push a button, all the symbols on the screen move around, maybe one of the lines has 3 or 4 matching symbols, and it pays out, you're like, whoa, yay, I won $3, and it goes ding, 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 and there's lights, and I won $3. No, you didn't. You lost 2. And this relates to breadcrumbing in narcissistic relationships, doesn't it? Ooh, my partner came home on time and they remembered the milk and they even brought me flowers. Okay. But in the last week, they also missed numerous important events and criticized you and belittled you once they came home with those milk and flowers. So in essence, just like with the slot machine, you lost more than you put in, but somehow you experienced it as a win. Those small wins are what make narcissistic relationships so sticky. You have that good conversation. Maybe you and your narcissistic person find a cool restaurant together. You solve a problem together. For a minute, you might be aligned with them and you're lucky enough to have a good day on the same day that they're having a good day. It could even be as simple as they do the things that people normally do, like help you with the grocery bags, don't criticize you for what you're watching on TV, offer to drop off something you forgot. Those simple little things that feel normal and relationshipy. The almost win, the feeling that more is coming. And for a minute you think, this is going to last. They did the groceries today. Tomorrow's just going to keep getting better and better and better and jackpot. It's the almost win, right? That normal day that you almost start to forget about some of the gaslighting. You almost start to forget about some of the mean things they do and say. You exhale. The struggle is, though, it almost doesn't last and you start pouring more money into the machine. Later that day or the next week, something will trigger that person who has a narcissistic personality style, and then the proverbial slot machine reels stop paying out, just show random stuff. And you will frustratedly wonder if you should keep playing the machine, but those almost wins keep coming. So you stay. And again, as B.F. Skinner, the behaviorist, said, the almost wins are as rewarding as the real wins. And this is why people stay in. Those little tiny wins are just enough to keep you in the game. And just like with the $3 win, that was really a $2 loss. You may even try to justify the relationship on the basis of the small win, but in the macro, it was all a loss. The little stuff of life is what's important. It's what most of us have in our relationships, but it really only works if it's interspersed with good stuff, not if it's interspersed with somebody who lies to you, betrays you, manipulates you, devalues you, gaslights you, and hurts you. That's the $5 in, $3 out of it all. When someone does that to you consistently, you can count on it happening more. And just like with a slot machine, we hold on to the hope that it might get better, that the next pull or the next pull or the next pull will give us the win. Maybe the upshot of all of this is that the reason pathological gambling in our country and the harm that it causes is a real issue is because we're all getting too sensitized to respond to reward, especially intermittent reward, or that idea of the almost reward, the almost win. And the almost win isn't just a slot machine thing. It's a narcissistic relationship thing. On too many days, the almost reward comes up, and many people in narcissistic relationships don't think they even deserve anything more than just the almost. And so the brain takes that almost win, almost near miss, and holds on to it as if it's the real thing. So you keep at the relationship. As a result, you can look up one day and realize that you stayed for decades because of the almost win, and realize that those mini wins weren't really wins, and that you still put way more in than you ever got out. Slot machines are always a bad bet, and so too are narcissistic relationships. But by understanding how even the people who make slot machines have figured out how to keep people playing longer and taking more of their money, sadly, the same thing happens to people in narcissistic relationships. The narcissistic people keep figuring out how to get your supply, in essence your money, and keep you in the relationship for far longer is healthy, and they give very little in return. So when I read that article on slot machines, I was kind of reading it, just curious one day, just for something to read. And then I was like, wait a minute. And I went back to the beginning. I said, this is exactly the dynamic of a narcissistic relationship. You think you won, but you really didn't. You actually got nothing. And even when you did win, you actually lost. And that's the paradox of the narcissistic relationship. Would love to hear from all you gamblers out there. Does this help give you a little bit more clarity on how the slot machine is the ultimate fix, and the narcissistic relationship is sort of the real world way that a lot of these dynamics play out? So let's talk now about baiting. So when we think about baiting, let's think about someone who is finally understanding the narcissistic story, the narcissistic narrative or relationship that they are stuck in. The person decides to disengage, or they don't fall for the love bombing part 10, or don't succumb to the hoovering. And I'll be talking about all these terms in this series. A narcissist is actually on a sort of single-minded struggle to have one thing in a relationship, and that's power. They had the power when they love bombed you. They have the power when they discard you. They have the power when they manipulate you. And they have the power when they gaslight you. It's very much a primary driver in the narcissistic dynamic, the drive for power. So, because we don't like power imbalances, you might watch these videos and try to take the power back, and you don't engage, and you don't react, and you don't explain, and then what happens? Always, the narcissists will switch up their tactics, and they're going to start poking at you and jabbing at you. They may do something like make fun of a physical quality that you're insecure about. Oh, yikes, that dress got a little bit tight, or look, your sister picked another loser, or how interesting that your boss didn't get your evaluation back yet. That may not be very good. They may say these cruel and dismissive and unsupportive things. They may start accusing you of things that aren't even true. They accuse you of cheating or stealing. They're trying to get to you. Just when you set those boundaries down, they try to get to you. And it's a normal human instinct to react when you are provoked, especially when someone's accusing you of something, especially something that you haven't done. But when someone is criticizing you about things that you may be particularly anxious about, or may say hurtful things about people you care about. In fact, that's often how a narcissist gets to you. Maybe not even going at you, but going after the people you care about. You may have even learned in trying to manage your narcissist to keep quiet when they insult you, but you can't keep quiet when they start going after the people that you care about. And if you do not understand the narcissistic relationship dynamic, then you may have, and I almost guarantee you will have, a really strongly emotional reaction to them. You may raise your voice. You may cry. You may yell. You may get really agitated. It's going to be very clear that you are upset. You may even look a little bit unhinged. And then the narcissist steps back with a look of very glib satisfaction and uses this as the perfect entry point to gaslight you. What's the matter with you? You look like you're totally out of control. You're crazy. You must have some kind of mental problems. You need to calm down. You're too sensitive. You know the drill well. They'll say it with this very even voice, just when you became reactive. And you literally will believe them and start to feel like there's something wrong with you. You get so angry at yourself for reacting because you know better. And now, you know what you just did? Sadly, you just delivered them a different kind of narcissistic supply. You left the narcissist feeling superior because now the narcissist is calm as can be while you're all kinds of emotionally frothed up, which, please let me normalize that for you. It's a totally appropriate and normal reaction on your part to someone saying terrible things to you. Normally, we react. But the narcissist, they're almost like they're relieved, or they get off, again, the power on getting the upper hand by being non-emotional, calling you out, and then walking away. This whole sequence is called baiting. Baiting is a very common narcissistic technique that often blindsides people. Baiting involves the narcissist sort of engaging in behavior that's designed to provoke an emotional reaction from you. And it tends to be an escalating process. They will keep pushing the envelope. They will keep pushing the cruelty of the things that they say until they get an adequate rise out of you, until they're satisfied that they rattled you enough. So let me give you an example. Here's what a baiting sequence can look like. So let's just say you're getting a little bit more wise to your narcissist. So you're doing all the things you're supposed to do. You're limiting your engagement and you're generally becoming more distant. Or let's just say your narcissist discarded you. And now your narcissist is trying to suck you back in. They're trying to hoover you. And you're not even actually that interested this time around. At that point, the narcissist may reach out. You've kind of discarded them, or they've discarded you, whatever. They might reach out. If that doesn't work, trying to pull you back in, they might ask you more pointed questions. If that doesn't work, they may start calling you out for being a jerk, or start cursing at you or calling you names. Then they may double down and comment on something that makes you anxious, something that they know about you, that they know will set you off. And here's where a narcissist's behavior can be so atrocious, because nothing is sacred. You've probably shared your vulnerabilities with them and they know them. So they may go after whatever your thing is, your appearance, your family, your children, maybe a medical condition you may have. And at this point, they may also start hurling all kinds of accusations at you. And this may even be sort of bizarre stuff from left field. Like they might say something like, oh, so I guess you must be a gold digger and replace me with a rich guy, which is going to be news to you because that's not true. Or they'll say, I get it. I get it. You're just too good for your family. You're ashamed of us and who we are and what we stand for. So you decided to go around town passing rumors about your pitiful family. And you're like, huh? So now you're almost blinded by the gaslighting. It's like being in some sort of carnival house of mirrors. You don't know which way to turn. But let's say you still keep your cool in the face of this. Now they may double down again with threats. So, how would you feel about me telling your boss what you really think of him? Or something like, should I tell your sister that I know about that STD you told me she got? Or it's a veiled threat. You know what I know. It sure would be a shame to share it with the world. And you know what? Even if you go after me for saying something, the world's already going to know. They are very good at throwing those threats out there, and it can be really unsettling. And this is the point when most people break and they succumb and they get back in touch with the narcissist. If you didn't break earlier in this process, right? If you were in an intimate relationship with someone, the odds are that you did share confidences with them and you did share them with trusted information, and they may actually have some proverbial dirt on you. So you agree to talk to them, even though you had set a boundary and didn't want to talk and didn't want to fall for the baiting. You agree to talk, and you know what? And I can guarantee you, trust me on this one, the narcissist can smell your fear. Once you are back at the table, it tends to be business as usual, invalidation, and basically, once their baiting works, they'll look at you with contempt, with a stance of, how dare you think you could avoid me? Now, at the most extreme, if you really don't crack under any of their baiting, baiting can even result and keep kind of escalating into them doing things like filing frivolous lawsuits against you. And that might then force your hand to take on the cost of a lawyer, or going back to court and asking for more custody and starting that entire process again, or just pushing for investigations. These sorts of things can be costly, they can be time consuming, they can be anxiety provoking. Now, not all baiting goes this deep or this dark. In most cases, when you're in any kind of a narcissistic relationship, baiting often takes the form of simply being provoked or getting provoked by them and giving in to their provocation with a strong emotional reaction. Now, baiting gives any kind of narcissistic, difficult, toxic people a sense of power. You becoming unhinged is a source of power and narcissistic supply for them. Again, it sort of fosters their cold sense of superiority. But keep in mind, that is just so they can feel in control again. Because you got to remember, they're very insecure. So when anyone starts pulling away from the narcissistic person or a very toxic person, they don't like the loss of control that comes from someone else calling the shots, and that comes from losing that narcissistic supply that they were accustomed to getting. So the idea that they can get it back through bullying and manipulation and intimidation and all that, that's really a core of baiting, to maintain that sense of control. Now, baiting can take lots of forms. There's lots of things that narcissistic, difficult people can do. They can push your buttons. They can be cruel about sensitive issues. They can say unkind things about important people in your life. They can make bizarre kinds of accusations about your behavior, such as, I don't know, infidelity, or make bizarre accusations about theft. They may make underhand, sort of passive-aggressive comments, or they may just do anything that they know, that then this is after years of studying you and learning you and getting to know you, that they know will upset you. And it raises that sort of paradoxical and interesting point. Narcissists actually don't fully lack empathy, and they sure as heck don't lack awareness of other people. They actually really clearly learn and recognize the vulnerabilities of other people. They just exploit them instead of protecting them. It's sort of the opposite of empathy, knowing what someone's vulnerable to and using it to hurt them. A good defense, though, against baiting is to know that it's coming. It is the dark side of what happens when you do no contact or gray rock, things that are also talked about in this series. Because a narcissist cannot tolerate being ignored, they will bait to draw you out, to get your attention, and then keep ratcheting it up. Knowing that it's coming can make it feel less scary. And also, as you feel their baiting getting ratcheted up, it is important to get advisors on deck, people on your team who you may or may not need. But this may include things like attorneys or other advisors you can turn to for guidance or punt this whole mess to. Narcissists almost always use chaos to their advantage. And under pressure, when you're drawn into that chaos, it's harder to get things organized, like getting advisors on board. So that begs the question, why do narcissists engage in baiting? Well, first of all, they love a fight. They are much better at fighting and at antagonism than the rest of us. It's almost like they're always uncomfortable, so they always want to punch and fight. They are also triangulators, and they are experts at exploiting chaos for their advantage. Now, once they bait and you go for the bait, they are able to use your anger and the other emotions that you express to their advantage. The narcissist's sort of limited empathy also means that they don't stop to think about how they're hurting you, if they're hurting you. In fact, in some ways, they kind of hope they are, because it's going to get the rise out of you. And because they lack what we call self-reflective capacity, they can't stop and think, how is my behavior affecting someone else? They lack awareness of how their baiting is experienced by other people, like you. So baiting, in some ways, is a way of projecting and of externalizing their inner battles and throwing them onto the world at large, especially those closest to them. But when it's all said and done, something I've said before, the narcissist is a petty tyrant and a spoiled child that is angry that someone is getting the best of them. They have to win. Narcissists have to win. And it can be hard to hold on to your commitment to no contact. But it is really important you do so. Whatever it is, no contact or boundaries or whatever. If their baiting works and you do find yourself pulled back in, go back to gray rocking, go back to being the robot and keeping the emotion out of your reactions. They're counting on you becoming all kinds of hysterical. Don't deliver that to them. It is really important that you stay as cool-headed as possible. And I know that's really hard. When somebody's really getting to you, it's very hard to do that. But once they've stepped away, once they've disappeared, the moment you're alone, cry and yell it out. Just don't let them see it. Don't give them that satisfaction. One question that many have asked me is, do they ever stop baiting? Over time, in most cases, yeah, they do. At some point, they're going to find new sources of narcissistic supply, and frankly, they may just get bored with you. They just sort of they fling you away like a child toy that they don't want anymore. But that's not always the case. If your situation escalates to the point to threats that are dangerous or actions that are dangerous, please contact law enforcement or other appropriate agencies. And also ensure that you speak to some form of legal advisor. Baiting is one of those patterns that in some small percentage of cases can escalate. Now, in most cases, baiting does not happen at that level. Baiting really is a form of poking at you to get a reaction out of you. And if you can remember that if you react in an emotional way, you are giving them what they want. And if you remember that, it may help you temper your response and make you say, I don't want to give them what they want. Over time, baiting can and will take a toll on you. So you need to make sure that you have supports in place to take care of you, to talk to, and also learn to take care of yourself. Years of enduring this pattern of baiting can really take a toll on your mental and physical health. And some people will say they often find it hard to even find someone to talk to who understands this pattern. Even some therapists who may not understand baiting and narcissistic relationships may not understand this. And it can really be destabilizing to feel like you're talking to people and they're saying, you're being paranoid. So remember, it's very important you find those people, you find your people that hear you and believe you and can bear witness to the struggle you're in. I hope that this video clarified this concept of baiting, the narcissists poking at you. It's a terrible cycle, and if you've been through it, you know it. If you haven't, I hope it doesn't happen to you, but you need to be aware it may very well happen to you, whether it's a family relationship, a work relationship, or an intimate 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 relationship.